now the average mortgage rate across the country is 6.8%. But there are homes in San Antonio that you can buy at a 2% mortgage rate locked in for the life of the loan. And in this video, I'm going to show you how that works. And there is one number that you have to pay attention to that decides whether or not this deal actually makes sense. I can't tell you how many times over the last few months that I have heard that there's just no way that anybody could buy this house with this interest rates being the way that they are. And I completely understand it. With the way mortgage rates have gone lately in the last few years since the pandemic and since those crazy low interest rates of that time, it just feels impossible to be able to afford some of these houses out there. A lot of us, including myself, are used to having payments that are in that $2,000 to even $3,000 a month range on the high end, and those are for really nice houses, or what I would consider a really nice house. And looking back on those periods of those crazy low mortgage rates, the lowest that the interest rates got on an average, right, was 2.65%. And that was in January of 2021. This was a 50-year low for the entire history of Freddie Mac. Millions of buyers have it, millions refinanced to get it, and overall it was the leading indicator, the leading factor that really drove that boom of the pandemic era housing craziness. And then in the summer of 2022, those mortgage rates more than doubled to get from that 2.65% rate that we had, the very lowest, all the way up to where we are at right now with 6.8%. And that leads us to where we are today. We are in a stagnant market. Things have been relatively slow over the last few years, ever since those rates went up. But the crazy thing is, like I said, those people that bought those houses with those rates, they didn't go anywhere. A lot of them still have those houses. And if you'll stick with me in a couple minutes, I'll explain to you how San Antonio has potentially even more of those super low interest rates than any other market in the country. And just to kind of give you guys some context, right, for those of you that aren't, super familiar with the housing market and how these mortgage rates work, I'm going to give you a quick example. So let's just say you're doing a house that's a $300,000 loan. Doesn't matter how expensive the house is, whether it's a $500,000 house, you're putting $200,000 down, or $300,000 FHA loan at 0% down. There's some nuances that change the PMI and things like that, but we're just going to do flat loan value, same property tax rate, all that stuff, okay? So if you look at San Antonio, we're just going to use an average number. Again, this is a super high number. So the average, property taxes in San Antonio are around 2.3 or 2.4%, but we're just going to use 2%, okay? And then we're going to use, roughly a 0.5% on the insurance rate. So about $1,500 a year for this specific loan. And then we are going to estimate what the mortgage payment would be with all the property taxes and insurance included, with a 6.8% interest rate and that 2.65% interest rate. At that 6.8% interest rate and financing $300,000, you're looking at a $2,705 a month mortgage payment. That includes property taxes and insurance. And this is the figure that has completely changed the real estate market in San Antonio and throughout the country. With the same numbers and a 2.65% interest rate, your payment would be $1,958, a over $700 a month difference. And that is the reason that a lot of these people are hanging on to those loans for dear life, because they have this crazy low interest rate and they're not selling. But like I mentioned just a few minutes ago, there are people that have to sell. There are people that have to move across the country. There are people that just want to have a change of scenery, leave San Antonio, go to another area of the country, another area of the state. And the way that you personally can take advantage and have that super low interest rate again is by taking over their loan. This is what we call an assumable loan. I've done plenty of these. I've worked with plenty of clients that have done this and taken advantage of this over the last couple years. The way this works is that you inherit the rate, you inherit their current principal balance, you inherit the amount of years that they have left, and it's locked in. Now, there are only specific types of loans that work this way, okay? And that is where San Antonio has a huge advantage, which is what I mentioned a second ago. You can't just go out and assume a typical conventional loan. These have to be essentially your government loans, okay? You're talking the FHA, VA, or USDA loans. And there are some kicks, okay? And these can probably, be things that you're thinking about in your head right now as I'm talking about this. And maybe you have some understanding of what the assumable loan is, but let's talk about some of the things that can really make or break that, which is what I mentioned again, that I'll talk about here at the end of this video. When it comes to San Antonio, we are Military City, USA, right? So when you think about it as the VA loans, okay, there are more VA loans in San Antonio than the vast majority of other military markets in the entire country. And the further and further we get away from that pandemic era where we had those crazy low mortgage rates, the more and more of these types of properties are going to become available for sale. You may be asking, well, how do you find out which ones of these properties are eligible for this type? And, how do I even get started with this? Well, there's a lot of details that come with it. And like I mentioned, our team has done plenty of these assumable loans for our buyers and kind of walked them through the process. And it's not a super simple process, I'll tell you straight up, but it's one of the things that we can kind of talk through when we get on that first initial 30-minute consultation, which you can schedule down in the description below. And so as you start to look more and more at these assumable properties, we got to find which ones are there. There's several different resources that we can look at. You can look at places like With Rome. That's a good resource that you can just go Google, and search for different properties in certain areas of San Antonio. It's a great resource, but it is kind of missing a few things specifically that may be there, that may not be there. It can also pick up some that may not be listed. Like if you go to Zillow and you're looking at the property description, usually if it's an assumable loan, the agent and the seller will list that in the description, but they're not always aware either of what they have under their belt. And it makes it an incredibly good opportunity for you guys whenever you can find those properties that are eligible to be assumed and they're not even being actively advertised as an assumable loan. And that's something that we can also look through because we've got some resources on our end that help us see which properties that are currently listed are just eligible without them being listed. And now I mentioned the VA loans, but you cannot forget about the FHA loans. So the FHA loans specifically are also big in San Antonio. For those people that move here and they're not eligible for that VA loan, because San Antonio is so affordable, it is a very good place to buy a first home. And that FHA loan is specifically for those first-time home buyers, kind of starter home packages, right? So it gives a really good opportunity for you guys to look outside of just the VA and the FHA loans. And that is one other thing too. On those VA loans, a lot of people think, well, I can't assume a VA loan if I'm not eligible for, a VA loan itself. If I'm not a veteran or active duty, I can't do that. That's not the case. In fact, on those assumable loans, you can actually make the offer, and if the seller is willing, seller has to be willing to do this, they can actually forfeit their entitlement for that specific property. And again, this is not something that I recommend to any of my veteran clients, but in certain situations where you're kind of in a hardship and you need to get that home sold, you are moving, you can't afford to have this mortgage rate and buy a house where you're moving to, then it may be worth doing that, right? You forfeit that VA entitlement and that for that specific property, and it stays with the property, and anybody can now assume that loan. So of the nearly 14,000 homes that are currently listed in the San Antonio market as a whole, there are over 2,000 of those that are eligible to be assumed. That is something that it is very, very, very difficult to find in any market across the country. So if you guys are looking for something like this, where you can get that super low interest rate, have an incredible payment, and literally save yourself tens, possibly hundreds of $1,000s over the life of that loan, San Antonio is one of the few places that has this opportunity. There is a number that makes or break this deal, and that is one of the biggest downsides of these assumable loans. This is not free money. This is not just hey, let's go. All right, we got $300,000 house. Let's go find this house. Okay, great. It's got a 2.5% interest rate on it. I'm going to take over that loan. Outstanding. No money down. Great. That is not how this works. If you look at the house itself, if the house was purchased, say back in 2021, okay, market went up for another year after that, increased by about 20% that year, in fact. And if you look at the overall appreciation, especially in certain areas of San Antonio that have still seen appreciation over the last 4 years since those rates went up and the market has started to flatten and decline, you are looking at potentially a home. Let's just say hypothetically, we've got one that's listed at $500,000. That home may have a balance of $350,000, $400,000, just kind of depends on how much they put down on that home and how much the market has appreciated. But in the vast majority of cases, especially the ones that I've seen, you're looking at anywhere between $50,000 to $150,000+ that you have to come out of pocket to be able to put down and be able to buy that house with that assumable loan. Because what you have to do is you have to take the sale price take the principal balance, you have to make up that difference. Now, there are so many options of these assumable loans in San Antonio that there's a good chunk of them that are in areas that really haven't appreciated a whole lot, and they may have done the 0% down VA, so you may only have to come in out of pocket with, say, $10,000 to $20,000. So it can be as low as like 5% in some situations, which is just about what you're going to put down anyways in most cases. So if you are looking to make that purchase, you just have to keep in mind, all right, I've got about X dollars. You can tell us what it is whenever we have our conversation. I have X amount of money that I can make up on the principal difference, and then we just have to figure out the total closing costs. The good thing is for the assumable loans, you're going through the current lender, right? You're taking over that loan completely. The fees are significantly less than if you're getting a standard mortgage, so it does make things a little bit better on that side because the closing costs are usually a little bit less. But that is another thing to keep in mind I haven't mentioned yet, because these loans do take a little bit longer, right? In most cases, you're looking at a 45 to 60 day closing window, which I have seen them go up as far as 90 days. So you got to be a little bit patient to get this awesome interest rate. But I'm telling you guys, if you have the capital and if you're going to put it on a new house anyways, you might as well look for these assumable loans and just wait a little bit, stay in a hotel, because it is going to literally save you tens of thousands of dollars over the amount of time that you have that property. San Antonio is a true buyer's market right now, and I firmly believe that. Now, again, it's not the entire market as a whole, so just keep in mind, if we're looking in, say, like Fernie, okay, there may be much fewer negotiation opportunities than if, say, you're looking on the far west side of San Antonio or, over on the northeast side, okay? There's gonna be pocket markets that are different, but it gives you some great opportunities in this situation, especially as you're looking at these assumable loans, and say there is a big difference. You may have, $10,000 to $20,000 that you need to, kind of negotiate down to be able to make up that difference and be able to get that loan. And those are things that we can help you with as far as, all right, let's try to negotiate this price down a little bit so that you can go in with that assumable loan and get that interest rate. And again, this is a situation that, again, can be life-changing for a lot of people. If you're already going to put the money down, you can get this interest rate that makes some of these houses actually affordable. It's a huge opportunity that not enough people are taking advantage of. And because we know San Antonio, and we know San Antonio extremely well, we have experience in all of these different facets of the mortgage process when it comes to the assumable loans. That is where we want to be a true resource for you guys. So again, you are more than welcome to call, text us, or email us anytime, days, nights, or weekends. But again, scheduling that call is going to be the best way to do it. And again, we've helped hundreds of people just like you over the last couple of years, and we would love to be that resource for you guys. Let us do some of that legwork for you, help you find these assumable loans, and get you in a dream situation for your next house. And while we're talking about low interest rates, if you're thinking about looking at a new home, but you're not sure if a brand new home from a builder or a assumable loan that's maybe an older home that's already been purchased a few years ago is the better option for you, take a look at this video right here where I broke that down, that specific comparison down. And until the next one, guys, we'll see you there.